you, Venki, and thank you all for joining me here. Starting on a lighter note, what is packaging design? So packaging design is like what it is here. You get to see me, you get to hear me, but on the contrary, I can't hear you, I can't see you. Nevertheless, I have to talk my best, I have to do my best, I have to, in fact, even wear my best if I was a pack. So you see how packaging has a very profound impact on how we relate to our products around us. In fact, packaging is probably the first touch point for a customer with your product. And if that does not do its work well, if that does not do its job well, then we end up with investing a lot of money and a lot of resources on a product that may not even be that one may not even pick up from the shelf. So now let us define what really best is for the consumer. It's often a very delicate balance between good aesthetics and good marketing or business skills. The marketing side is still something that is that is tangible because it's enumerable, whereas the design side or the aesthetic side is something that is seen as is seen as esoteric because it is something that you can't that you can't. It's very abstract for most people. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break this elusive process and break it down into heads which can be deliberated upon, which can be debated upon, so that at the end of it we're able to really articulate our way through to a good design. And what I would like to bring to your notice here is that, like many other disciplines, design also is a discipline which follows a set of rules. And these rules are rules that have been brought in because of people experimenting. There has been a lot of observation that has been done, and after a lot of deliberation and a lot of observation, these set of rules have been put forward, which helps us in understanding whether a design works or doesn't work. So any good packaging starts with a great brief. Because a brief document is really where all the design decisions stem from. Every design decision stems out of the brief document. And it's really important that we spend as much time in bringing out this document and detailing it out so that, it leads to a fantastic collaborative process between the design house and the client. And at the end of it, if you want a fantastic package, there is no better way than to have a great brief. So if you look at it, if you look at a brief, I would divide a brief into two different parts. The first part being that of strategic overview. Now, a strategic overview is something that would define, number one, the project background. What is your project? What is your product? Why are you wanting to package or repackage it? What are the objectives of your packaging? What are the objectives of packaging? Are you bringing out a new product into the market? The objective could be about increasing the shelf appeal of the product, or sometimes it could also be to just increase awareness of your product. The third point here is target audience. Now, I think all of the strategic overview, the pivotal point for the strategic overview of the brief is the target audience. Is your target audience, the more number of details you're able to fill in about the target audience, the better for you, the better for the project. So what kind of, how old is he? What kind of income category does he fall into? What is his age? What is his geographic location? What is the personality trait, interests, lifestyle? What is his lifestyle? So all of this will also answer things like what is it that motivates him to purchase this category of product. Include any customer research that you have probably done before. Including all of that into the brief really helps the designer articulate what he has to do next with the design. This leads us to the point of the brand or the product positioning. So this will really, this is the point where we should ask questions like, what makes your product appealing to the target audience? What emotions should you evoke in the target audience, and what is the change in behavior that you are expecting out of him once he uses your product? Of course, the last one is competition and understanding of the competition. If your product is something that is already existing, that other people are already marketing, any and all information about what is the competition doing, what is the brand positioning they have sought, will help us, be able to deal with the competition that we are going to face very soon. Now we have the second part of the brief, which is a favorite amongst people who design. This is packaging requirement. I think the first thing that we need to know are all the creative mandatories. You probably have already a logo designed. You would have, I don't, if you have a brand color, if you have, fonts and graphics that you have already specified, if you have logos, if you have a photography, imagery that you have already, have in mind, which you want to put on the pack, you must share all of this with the designer. And at this level, the designer also needs to know what is it that you want to do with the pack? Do you want to make it contemporary looking? Do you want to give it a traditional look? Do you want to make it chic? Do you want to make it fun and zany, or something that is non-avoidable? One has to know if the pack has to look masculine or it has to look feminine. So that takes us to the packaging purpose, which is slightly different from the first point, which is you could be, let's say, packaging food, and the packaging itself has to fulfill a function of, let's say, protect from impact, like if you're packaging eggs. Or it could also be that you are preventing spoilage of food with the help of your packaging design. Production and manufacturing details after this is something that the design house as well as the client sits together and debates about it. It basically involves understanding what kind of materials are best suited for the product and the brand that you have in hand. What kind of substrate would you use? What kind of printing and other production details that are required? All of these, you will wonder, why does one have to discuss that at this level, at this point? Well, it really defines so many boundaries and so many limits, or so many horizons for design to be able to explore. For example, if you have a pack and you say, okay, print production and cost says that we have to limit it to only 2 colors, that has to be told to the design agency right at the beginning, because 2 colors is 2 colors. The design could be very different if one was allowed 4 colors. Then you have pack copy. This is a very interesting point. The reason I put it here is because a lot of our clients give us only the name of the product, and they say, why don't you just begin the design? We will give you the rest of the details later. Details could be very, very vital. For example, it could be legal information. It could be as mundane as legal information, to something that is so intrinsic to the product, like, for example, cooking instructions, let's say. Those details are things that a designer could pick up, and that could become the source of the design inspiration itself on the pack. Of course, no brief is complete without an understanding of deliverables. This would be both in terms of the what is being delivered at the end, as well as time schedule. So a lot of packaging projects can end with just a drawing. Some of it will require detailed artworks. We could go one step further and create mock-ups, create 3D renderings. All of these have to be debated, considering all of these should be considered based on what is the product and what is the final packaging going to be. Now, the last point that I put in here, which is really my favorite in all briefs, is, do we have a list of examples of the things that the client likes, and also the things that the client doesn't like? It could be within category, or it could also be outside category. But what is really the logic? What is really the point from where the point of view from where the client comes is very, very obvious from the examples that he would like to bring to the table. because that really says, often what has happened is while showing examples, we have figured that some of our clients do not like the color black. They are averse to it. So, which we would have probably not guessed had we not had examples. They may often what happens is when you're articulating what you like and what you don't like in terms of words, it may be something, but when the visual comes, it becomes very obvious that it probably fits better if it was of a different nature. Now, what I took you through was the brief itself. When the brief comes to the table of the designer will be breaking down into these 7 points, which I like to say, which I like to call it as nuts and bolts of design. Now, what are the nuts and bolts of design? The very first thing, of course, is color. Now, here I'll show you, most of the times when color is being spoken of in the world of brand, it's always the Coca-Cola red. But I love the example of Heineken. This beautiful green that they have completely owned in all their products, in every single variant of their product, in every single advertisement, in every single communication that they have. It's very, very rare to see Heineken going wrong with the green. And it's one of the most beautiful greens. The reason also I like Heineken's green, and I bring it as an example every time I talk about brand colors, is because in terms of production, the Coca-Cola red or the red color is a very easy color to reproduce, whether it is in printing, whether it is on screen. The red color produces very well. Green is a very difficult color to get consistent across all mediums. So while we talk about color, I thought I'd like to bring this pack that we from our studio have designed. It's for this brand called Milklane, and Milklane is a toxin and antibiotic safe milk, which is a new property that milk is now milk as a brand, milk as a category is now talking about. So what we did for the pack design is that we took the most soft, beautiful, gentle, and pastel shades, and we created this pack. These colors really connote how benign and how gentle the product is, which is inside the pack. Okay, that brings us to the next nut and bolt, which is shape. Now, I think world over, when we talk about shape, it's definitely the Heinz bottle. And Heinz sells 650 million bottles of condiments across the world in a year. And over the years, it has changed its bottle shape from you can see, from a squeezable bottle to an upside down bottle to a plant bottle. But all of these, the entire range of shapes that Heinz has taken, there is only one single intention. And the intention is that of being able to pour the sauce most beautifully, most gently, and most interestingly out of the bottle. So while a lot is being spoken about, has been spoken about the size, the shape of the bottle itself, my favorite, of course, is that of the label shape. Now, nobody talks about the label of Heinz. Do you notice on the left side is the first bottle that Heinz ever came up with? This was in 1890. Now we are so many decades after that. The shape of the label remains unchanged, which only means one thing: that when I walk into a really crowded marketplace, a crowded shelf, it takes me seconds. It just takes me a few seconds to figure out where the Heinz bottle is and be able to pick it up. So yes, let's come to Coca-Cola's shape. I mean, yes, there is no talk on branding and shape which does not have Coca-Cola mentioned, because what is beautiful is that today the Coca-Cola bottle is being used as a flattened form, as a logo. How much more iconic can you get than that? So while we speak about shape in connection with iconic brands like Coca-Cola or Heinz, where the shape of the bottle itself or shape of the package itself is something that draws loyalty, that draws a lot of recall value, that draws a lot of people back to it because they love that shape, and you can almost ascribe the entire category to have a shape like that. Here is an example that I'm bringing out from our portfolio, which is a pack that we did for ITC. This is a celebratory pack, and you can see it's all Diwali all over here. It's shaped in the form of a rocket. This worked really well with the audience because they loved it and they picked it up. And what works here is that the shape brings about innovation. It brings about a certain novelty on the shelf. It brings about a certain surprise element for the consumer, and he definitely comes up and picks it up. So shape works both for loyalty as well as for innovation. Okay, so now that brings us to the next nut bolt element, which is logo type. What I have done for you here is I have pulled 4 logos or logo types or symbols of brands which are known all over the world, and what I want to bring to your attention here is all 4 of them largely use red. And color being the most important visual element that the brain is able to is stimulated by, we don't have that advantage here. All of them are red largely. Despite that, each of them stands apart from the other. How's that? Okay, I think it's because the symbol or the mark that has been used, or the logo type that has been used here, is so beautifully distinct from each other. It's so beautifully done, it's so beautifully created that it leaves a lot of recall value for the consumer. So often what happens when we work with clients, especially for packaging, their usual question is, oh, do we really need to develop a logo type? Why can't we just write it in a nice font and leave it like that? No, I think these are examples to show you that even if it is packaging, and more so if it is packaging, it's really important that you pay attention to creating a logo type which is definitely memorable, which is something that is very clean and neat, which you can read when put on a shelf, and which has a clever idea which is integrated into it. Now, while we talk about the clever idea, what is this clever idea? It's called a visual mnemonic, which is basically something that that is integrated into the into the logo type, so that one is able to see it and remember it for its cleverness. Okay, what I've done here is I have to illustrate to you how flexibility has to be built in to a logo type, particularly in the case of packaging. And I'll tell you why it is important very soon. I have put here about 6-7 different kinds of marks. It could be an abstract mark, some of it could be mascot logos, there are combination logos, there are word marks and pictorial marks. When it comes to packaging, largely something that is a combination mark works beautifully well, because an abstract mark is of course something very, it works well only when you have products which don't have to sell in a matter of a few seconds. So I was talking to you about flexibility, building flexibility into logo type. This is again from our portfolio of work for Himalaya Healthcare, where the right side logo type was something is what we had created initially. It turned out to be that the Himalaya word is really long and may not fit into really small packet sizes. It may not fit into it may not fit into back of packs. It has a limitation in it being really horizontal and long. So what a lot of good brands do, a good brand practice, is to be able to create something like an emblem, like how we've created here with the H and the leaf. So this can be used in, let's say, the fine print of medicines, which is what Himalaya Herbal Healthcare manufactures a lot of. We even created a hologram with it, which went into packs where a lot of spurious brands were coming up and putting out spurious stuff in the name of Himalaya. Okay, I'm bringing back Milk Lane again here. This is again for logo type. It is interesting how the M, which was created for Milk Lane, we use that as center stage in the pack design itself. What it did for Milk Lane was that it made it very memorable, and the consumers were immediately able to relate Milk Lane to the M, and they said, oh, it's the M milk. So while we're talking about creating clever mnemonics for logo types, I have put in a couple of more examples of the logos that we have created for big brands. This is Kotak Mahindra Bank. When we created this logo, what we did was, and the brief was that we had to integrate the global with the local. So we created the Devanagari curve, which is what Kotak's the first alphabet for Kotak, and we fused it with the infinity logo, infinity symbol, and we created this for Kotak, this property for Kotak, which is basically talking about global standard banking practices coming to local Indians. Okay, now here what I'm showing you are two different logos which again we had created. I would talk only about the right side one, which is the logo for UNESCO Regional Center for Biotechnology, which is RCB. So what we did with RCB, the alphabet RCB, is you can see on the screen, R is written in the form of 2, B is written in the form of 3, and you have C, which has these 23 little genetic things inside it. So what it forms is 2 and 3, which is 23, which is basically the number of pair of chromosomes in the human body. So you see how there's a direct correlation between the RCB alphabets and how it's an alphanumerical, beautiful alphanumerical clever idea that we happen to create for Regional Center for Biotechnology. Okay, so let's talk about texture and materials. Tactile sensibility of in packaging in India is, according to me, one of the most underrated aspects of design on the shelf today. Here you can see how Mason and Company, they make bespoke chocolates, has used a brown paper at the base of the pack, and it immediately connotes for the consumer something that's single origin, something that's vegan, something that's organic. How quickly just using texture and using a change of material has made such a huge difference to the way a consumer looks at this chocolate versus the way he would look at, let's say, Cadbury's. So you've seen, one of the best places of texture and material being used today in the market is probably baby products, where if you see the Johnson & Johnson baby range, you will see that the bottles are designed to look like babies, and the texture and material that are used are more velvety, are more soft. The feel of the pack is something that is that a lot of care is being taken. A lot of care is taken. So here is an example from our own portfolio. This is a premium vodka that we had designed, Canvas. Since it belongs to the premium category, a lot of work and a lot of deliberation was put into the feel of the bottle. How does it feel? Can one hold it at one go? There were beveled portions of the printed areas, and there were areas which were transparent and which played with areas which were non-transparent or translucent, all creating a feeling of premiumness and of exclusivity. Okay, so imagery. That's the next nut bolt that a designer has in hand. Here you would have all seen these packs on the shelf recently, and so here Lay's wants to remind each one of us that smiles can make a difference in other people's lives. This was a collaboration between Lay's and Operation Smiles, where they had promised to share a part of their proceeds to Operation Smiles, which helps children and young adults with cleft conditions. Now, what I'm going to show you next is another chips brand from Lay's, and you'll see how this is so different from the imagery that is here. So here the narrative is that of, is much more mature. It's all black with fiery colors. And these colors are things that bring out the feeling of maybe a barbecue party. So what's interesting to notice, Max is a brand of chips that was targeted towards young male. And this wasn't. So you see how with just the change of imagery on the pack, the people that they're addressing to, the targeted audience that they're addressing to completely shifts, and it's so well done here. That brings us to the last nut and bolt, which is brand architecture. So I show you the example of, put the example of Budweiser here. So you see the two packs on the two sides of the screen. You have, both of them have the brand signature or the brand story on the top half of the can. While Bud Light is, the lower portion of course is for the variant. While Bud Light is blue, it's fresh, it's young, it's bold. It appeals to a target audience which is which likes that kind of look. And on the left side you have Budweiser, which is more traditional. It targets an audience which is more traditional in its taste. While both of them are addressing two different kinds of target audience, they're still tied down together. They're tied up together. That I would like to say by, you know, the roof, the commonality of the brand signature, which is put on the roof of the pack. So this is something that we had created for Himalaya after we had created the logo and the identity. The first thing that they asked us to do was to redesign the pharma range. Most of you would remember that Live 52, which is what the pack was led by and is still led by, was a yellow jaundicey looking pack. So we changed all of that, and we brought the new brand colors into the pack. We created an entire range. All the pharma drugs were all packaged similarly. And what happened was, when put on the shelf, they formed a robust appearance together. They looked like one family. So when this became a success, Himalaya was wanting to launch a single herbs range of products. You can see that on the right. So this was not created then, of course. This was a new range of products that they wanted us to do. The brief that was given to us was it had to draw from the pharma range while it still had to be distinct from it. So we had the task of creating this brand architecture here. This single herbs range was also something which was over the counter, which means that you didn't really need a prescription to be able to buy it. So how we did that was we used the same pack shape, but we elongated it a little bit more to create that distinction, just mildly there. We brought in these beautiful looking herbs, which is what went into the packs, and we created illustrations. Because this was an over-the-counter product and not a pharma product, this had to look a little bit more attractive. So we brought in that attractiveness by putting in the drawings of those herbs, and you can see how the division of the teal or the green color vis-a-vis white has also been mildly altered. All of this has helped Himalaya bring about what we would call, you know, the commonality is maintained while it has also become something that and that is distinct from the mother range. This is the other example from our portfolio of work. This was for MTR Foods. On the right side, you can see, on the left side, you can see the range of pounded masala powders. This category is generally seen as something more traditional. It is seen as something that people who are slightly older would go and buy. And on the right side was a new range of soups, ready-to-eat soups that they had launched. This is something that that was consumed by people on the go, people who are younger, people who had speed in their life. What we did was we created a range both for the traditional look as well as for the contemporary look. You can see how the two are, you can distinctly see the traditional versus the contemporary. And what we managed also to do is to be able to keep with certain graphic elements. We were able to keep the commonality also, the common thread between both the ranges alive and kicking. So, okay, so these were the 7 things that we those are the nuts and bolts for the design house or the designer to be able to use to create your the brand package that you want. But the question still remains as how do you evaluate a good design output? So the answer to that would be that, you know, one single element or just one single thing out of this list is not really going to give you the great package. It has to be a combination. It has to be a combination. It has to be the coming together. It has to be the beautiful integration of multiple elements, out of which maybe one has to be a dominant signature element, and it has to be ably supported by all the other elements around it, so that you know, that main element is not overpowered by the others which are dancing around it. So, you know, finding this right balance in the combination is often the most difficult part, is the craft of the design. And once it is crafted well, the fact that it has to relate back, every aspect of all that is crafted has to relate back, it has to be linked back to the brand's history or unique story, is also vital, without which it really doesn't work. So what I've done is I have created a ready reckoner for people who are interested here to, you know, to keep while judging or while evaluating a good design. This I call the 10 commandments of good design details. So let's go over it one by one. The first is, of course, aesthetics. Please ask yourself, when you get your design options or when you shortlist your design, you ask yourself, is this the most outstanding look that my brand can have? Do I look good carrying it? Will I like to take it home? How does it look when I take it home? These are questions that are the first things that you should ask when you are shortlisting the design. The second, of course, is concept fit. Not only are we aiming at a very pretty looking design, the design should, of course, fit and convey your brand's superior value message. What makes this brand unique? What is interesting? What's worth considering? Better than competitive products? Why should I buy this? It has to marry aesthetics. Of course, we haven't spoken much about shelf impact. Getting seen in is the first step towards getting sold. When we design new packs, we must assess designs in a shelf context, displayed side by side with competition, and ascertain if the design is visible enough to get seen, because getting seen means getting sold. Okay, so that brings us to merchandise proof. What is merchandise proof? Okay, as part of getting seen, let's not think only of front of packs. Consider how you are merchandised, and ensure that essential information is contained on all sites that may be shown to consumers. The next thing is quick and clear product identification. While it seems like it is common sense, a lot of times when one gets into the design phase, it doesn't seem to be, it eludes us. The pack design must quickly and immediately answer what the product is and be able to identify you know, what category it falls into. Then is keeping it simple and less is more. Yes, what is essential info that a user is interested in? Keep only that in the front, move all other things to the back. Eye tracking studies show that simple packs that make effective use of white space and are easy to navigate score very high with consumers. The last three, which is aesthetically pleasing structure, functional structure, and easy to use structure, I would say all of this we could put into, you know, one single question, which is your structure pleasing to look at? Is it aesthetic? Which means that of course, what is aesthetic to a male may not be aesthetic to a female, may not work well for a child. So target audience, yes, aesthetic sensibilities of target audience has to be considered. A functional structure. So here is an interesting thing that I've often spoken about when it comes to packaging. Why are, let's say, fridge bottles always round in shape? Why are they not square in shape? Because if they're square in shape, they don't roll about, number one. Number two, they can also be stacked inside very easily when you don't have space on the door. I wonder why nobody has considered that. Then the last thing, which is easy to use structure. Now, you know, how many of us have had milk packets which cut up and yet don't pour well. There are big cans of infant food which are so large to grab or impossible to open when you're carrying a baby in your hand. Or sometimes you have those annoying toothpaste which you don't want to you don't want to screw back in the cap. Then you have so ease of use has many dimensions. These dimensions could be placement, they could be opening, they could be closing, dispensing methods, dosage control, hygiene. In fact, there was a client of ours some years back who, when we were working for them, we spent a considerable amount of time just hearing the sound of the flipping of the cap, because they said that that's so critical for their customers to feel whether the product was genuine or not genuine. Imagine just the flip of a cap getting attention in the design. So if your design is able to answer any of these or most of these 10 commandments, and you're able to tick when you get your design shortlist, yes, you have a good design in hand. So thank you so much for walking with me through this R on design. I had a strategic brand design agency called The Fool, which Venki has already mentioned. We have worked with large and small businesses and helped them build delight for their consumers. We design faces for brands across interfaces, from identity systems to packaging and online branding. Venki, over to you.
Deep thanks for the time you took, for the session you've taken, for the wide range of topics you covered. Really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you very much for being here today.